And so we continue. This is part 2 today, where we deal with the subject of jewelry, or some would say Christian adornment from the scriptures. And I'll continue where I left off. Last week, we looked at Christian adornment or jewelry in the Old Testament. We looked at some principles, where we as a church are, how did we get there? This week we continue, and I hope I can finish. If not, we leave it till another week. We'll conclude, but next Sunday, we will be streaming live from the New Anglican Church, where we will have our Healthy You in 2022. It's a seminar, it's really seminar-based, where we will have individuals discuss various aspects of our health: financial, physical, emotional. We'll be bringing in various specialists who will talk on different topics, give demonstrations. We may even have medical practitioners who will see 1 or 2 individuals. High blood pressure, check your sugar possibly. So we'll be covering a number of topics. So we won't have our regular Bible class. Instead, we'll be going from 6 to 8 from the parking lot. As a matter of fact, weather permitting, it will be outdoors at the New Anglican Church. So I just want to make you aware of that, so you will not be looking for our scheduled Bible class next week Sunday, sorry. So I will show you a sample of the program. And here we go. It's called Healthier You in 2022. And so let's do a quick share. Okay. Having some problems with my flyer. So there we go. Healthier You in 2022. And you will have various health lectures who will come on: physical, mental, emotional, as you can see, as spiritual health, October 9th to the 29th, 6 to 8 p.m. each evening, right in the parking lot. And at the ending of each of the health seminars, they will start first. I will conclude with a prophecy or teaching from the books of Daniel and Revelation. So this is what we're looking at. You can share it with others whom you may so choose. And so here we go. Jewelry in the New Testament. As I said, last week we looked at jewelry in the Old Testament. Today we look at the aspect of jewelry in the New Testament. And they're not as common in the New as in the Old, but they're still there. And two major passages that will be looked at is 1 Peter 3, 1-6, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 8-10. So let's look at jewelry in the New Testament. It is used as adornment. And one of the better examples would be, you have 1 Peter, as I said, and Timothy would be in the book of Revelation. When we look at Revelation 17 and verse 4, it says, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of a fornication. And so we see here, it is used as adornment because she is adorned. It says she was arrayed, New King James, in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. So that's one example. Let's look at 18 in verse 16. It says that great Babylon, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls. So here again, we see it is used it is used in the sense of adorning someone, making them look good or prettier, we would say. They make mention of the fact that it is similar to God's love for Jerusalem. And let's briefly look there, how he described his people when they turned away from him. But there's something unique about it. So he talks about how he saw them as a child who was unwashed, just delivered. He said, I clothed you with fine linen and covered you with silk. I adorned you with ornaments, put bracelets on your wrists and a chain on your neck. I put a jewel in your nose, earrings in your ears, and a beautiful crown on your head. Thus you were adorned with gold and silver, and your clothing was of fine linen, silk, and embroidered cloth. You ate pastry of fine flour, honey, and oil. You were exceedingly beautiful and succeeded to royalty. And then he talks about a harlotry. He's saying, this is how I took care of you, and yet still you turned your back on me. However, as it was shown with Babylon itself, and for those of you who are just joining us and not aware, we're looking at jewelry in the Bible, which you always wanted to know but were afraid to ask, by Angel Manuel Rodriguez. Okay, someone else is still asking for the link. So we find that eventually they will, when they turn against her, okay, here we go. They will remove her jewelry from her. In Ezekiel, we find 16 and 39, and I'm just briefly going over some of these. They will also strip you of your clothes, take your beautiful jewelry, leave you naked and bare. But that is not germane to our study. So the parallel is in Revelation 17:16, where it says, and the 10 horns which you saw in the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate, naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So our author is drawing some parallels between the two. But now let's look at something else. He says, one can hardly overlook the fact that another woman is mentioned in Revelation, but her adornment is essentially different from the one worn by the prostitute. This time, the woman represents the people of God. She has a crown consisting of 12 stars in Revelation 12:1 and is dressed with the sun rather than like a counterpart with all this gold and jewel and everything else. So this woman representing the people of God is clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland, King James says crown, of 12 stars. Come on now, not showing me what I need to see, but anyway, a garland or crown of 12 stars. And this here would represent the Stephanos. So when we look at it here, King James says, well, New International Version says a crown of 12 stars, but there's a difference, as our author points out, some differences. This here would be the Stephanos, which was generally a crown of victory. And the concept comes from the ancient Greeks and Romans, etc., who would compete. And when they won, they would be given a little crown of wreath to place around their head. So just something for you to take note of. So we notice the prostitute, how she's dressed. We notice this other woman, how she is dressed. There's some differences between the two. Look at Revelation 19:14. And the armies in heaven, clothed in what? Fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. So adornment as a whole is used for the people of God as well as those who are not of God. It was a pattern or practice that clothing could mean something special, or they simply use clothing as a basis of adornment, because that's what we're looking at. Uses of jewelry in the New Testament as adornment. What about here? Revelation 3:18. Looking at jewelry as adornment in the New Testament. And here we read, I counsel you to buy from me what? Gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments that you may be clothed, shame of your nakedness do not appear, etc., etc. So here's another example, Revelation 6:11, where it says, then a white robe was given to each one of them. So we can see God pays special attention to adornment as it was. He told them they should rest a while, 7 and 9, which says, after these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one can number, of all nations, tribe, people, and tongues, standing before the throne and the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. So everybody wears clothing as a symbol of beauty, or maybe as a status. But the point is, it is used as a type of adornment, whether for good or for bad. And they talk about the New Jerusalem is described as a place, and it's decked out. Verse 9, Revelation 21, verse 11. I'm going to pick up now. Having the glory of God, her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. Also, she had a great and high wall with 12 gates and 12 angels at the gates, names written on them, which are the names of 12 tribes of children of Israel. Look at verse 14. City had 12 foundations. Okay, sorry, that's not it. Verse 18, the construction of its walls was of jasper, and the city was what? Of pure gold. Okay, can't get any larger. Like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. They talk about all these here, the jasper, the sapphire, chalcedony, emerald, sardonyx, sardius, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprase, jacinth, amethyst. I'm switching to the New Living Translation. Doesn't help much because we don't know some of these stones. That's exactly what they look like. So I've already covered the foundations of the city. When we go to chapter 18 of 21, we read the construction, okay? Sorry, I covered that. And we've already seen verse 2, where John talks as a bride dressed for her husband. But look at something else that I'd never considered. The use of gold, silver, and costly stones in the construction and adornment of buildings seemed to have been a practice in the time of the apostles. 1 Corinthians 3:12. Let's look at that and see. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stone, wood, hay, straw. So this was obviously something that they were familiar with, that he felt comfortable using it, using this as an analogy to describe what would be happening with the church. So this was something he's saying basically was common. So it was used for beauty, to express beauty. But the other one is it is used as a currency. And he points out, Acts chapter 3, verse 6, we read, "Then Peter said, silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Rise up and walk." Let's look at 20 and 33 also, where he also says, "I have coveted no one's silver or gold or apparel." So it was something that they were used to having this stuff, persons around that time. Look in 1 Peter 1:18. Let's notice what's happening here. "You are not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold." Verse 19, "but with the precious blood of Christ." Now, the Apostle Peter is actually turning things on its head. Gold doesn't corrupt. People still find gold from thousands of years and it's still good. Don't know how silver manages. Blood, on the other hand, will decay. It will dry up. It will break down. But he's saying in comparison to the blood of Christ, it's like silver and gold are corruptible. So he spins it on its head to drive home his point. That we were redeemed with the precious blood, which is of more value, greater value than silver and gold. Let's look at Christ's counsel to the disciples in Matthew 10 and 9. When he sent them out, he says what? "Provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts." So it was used as a medium of currency. That's all we're seeking to establish here. Mark 6 and 8 tells us, "He commanded them to take nothing for their journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no copper in their money belts. Wear sandals, not put on 2 tunics." And Luke 9:3, which says to us, "And he said to them, take nothing for the journey." You'll find Luke, Mark, and Matthew are similar to each other. So it's used as a type of currency, evidence of wealth. This is also, we find this here, and we've already covered Babylon, so I'm not going to go through it in that manner. Here we go back into, we go into James, where James is saying your gold and silver are corroded, and your corrosion will be a witness against you and eat your flesh like fire. So it was evidence of wealth. When you had gold and silver, it showed that you were someone, that you had something. And it's possible, they point out, that the gold that the Magi gave to Jesus, or the wise men, could have been in the form of jewelry. Pearls, we know, were of great wealth. So we find in Matthew 7:6, where it says what? "Do not give what is holy to the dogs, nor cast your pearls before swine." So don't give something that is precious to you to others who do not value it. That's the basic lesson there. But we also see in 13 and 45 of Matthew, where Jesus likens the kingdom of heaven to a merchant seeking beautiful pearls. He found one of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. So here again, it's showing, hey, it was something that was an evidence of wealth. It was a type of currency. And he says the merchant is someone who is of wealth because he is involved in buying and selling pearls. That's why he invests everything just to get this one pearl. And then, of course, we have the example of James, who talks about a well-dressed man wearing a gold ring and contrasts him with a poor man. Fine apparel should come in, and a poor man in filthy clothes. You pay attention to the one wearing the fine clothes and say to him, you sit here in a good place, and say to the poor man, you stand there, sit here at my footstool. Have you not shown partiality among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? So there's a good possibility that these individuals were not members of the church, and that's why they told the rich man that he must sit this place. Otherwise, he'd have normally gone where he would always sit, or what was a customary seat. But they told the poor man, you sit over there. So they were showing partiality in the New Testament church, and James rebuked them for it. The person who apparently came in to worship or whatever, it describes how he was dressed. So it was there as a symbol of social status. Let's go back into Revelation now, 14 and 14. A white cloud, on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head what? A golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Again, this is the crown of victory. I don't know if I can get this. Yes, I can. Okay, unless you have a tablet or something large. The Greek word there, Stephanos, a crown or wreath. So in this case here, this wreath or this crown is gold, but it's not the diademata or the diadem, which signifies the royal crown. So in this case here, it is showing status, but it's also a crown of wreath. But the most important thing is that it is a crown that is given that the Son of Man wears. So it is a symbol of, it's a status symbol and one of position. That's the basic gist of it there. Now let's look at another one, 19 and 16. Okay, referring to the name that is given to Christ. He is King of Kings and Lord of Lords, which you also discover later on, and we'll come to that it's also a symbol of power, jewelry. Revelation 4:4, the 24 elders. Clothed in white robes and crowns of gold on their head. Once again, this is the Stephanos, the crown of victory. There are only 3 times the diadem or the royal crown is worn, is mentioned in Revelation. One by the dragon, meaning Satan, one by the beast, his emissary, and the 3rd time is by Christ. The dragon has 7 crowns. The beast has 10 crowns. Christ simply has many crowns. Symbol of power and authority. And this is where I'm getting to now. When we look at the story of the prodigal son, he put the best robe on him, put a ring on his finger, sandals on his feet. Our author is saying that the ring would have been a ring of status, of authority, that he was different from the slaves. He was back in his father's house, that he had been fully welcomed. That's what the ring represented in this story here. And the ring becomes more significant because he gets it after he has wasted his share of the inheritance. So it shows that he is completely welcome back. Let's look at offerings now. And I go back to Matthew chapter 2 and verse 11, where they brought him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They're saying these were offerings to this newborn king. And this is how Joseph and Mary were able to finance their stay in Egypt when they had to run. And it has some restrictive or limited use. And jewelry is used to indicate social status in the case of kings and queens. So let's look at some of them. And the two passages that Seventh-day Adventists rely on most heavily, I guess, is 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 1 to 6, 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. We're going to cover that later on, so I won't spend much time with there, except to say that the apostles told us that we should be clothed with a meek and quiet spirit. And let me quickly pull it up. But we're not going to spend much time on it. Come on, at this stage here, since we're coming back to it. And one of the things when studying, we must look at the entire passage or the pericope, the section, and that's from verse 1 through to 6. And so we have to look at the entire thing, and the basis of it is he was mainly speaking to the women, or the wives, we would say. And he was telling them how they ought to behave, what their manner should be like, what their conduct should be. And he emphasizes the internal or character as opposed to outward behavior. And that applies to not just physical adornment, but I believe the principle applies no matter what we do. We have a practice in the Western world where we save our best behavior for those who are outside of our homes, but we can treat those who are closest to us, well, anyway. And so we have all the right manners and know how to say all the right things and everything when we're outside the home, but when we are inside the home, we treat people like dirt, I say. And so in this sense here, that is just a pretend. I call it public performance or public profile versus personal character. God is saying, let the character be refined, and then you will be consistent throughout. And the second one is 1 Timothy 2, verse 9 and 10. In like manner also that the women adorn themselves. The first one was by Peter. This one is by Paul to Timothy. In modest apparel with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair, gold, or pearls, or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. So once again, we see the emphasis is on the character. And I want you to visualize what would the world be like if we were to seek to develop our character the way if we were to place as much emphasis on character as we do on our looks. Now, I know persons who stand in the front of the mirror and they fix, and I've watched them and I'm like, why you keep pulling that shape? It ain't making no difference. Ain't nothing changing. Stop pulling your shape. I just kept my peace. You know, we look and we make sure that the hair is right and everything is in place. And, you know, you got to make sure this fix. You shave and you shape up the moustache. Ladies, make sure that the powder is right and the hair is in place and all of that. But what if we were to place that same emphasis on the character? What a difference that would be made. And we go back in Revelation 12 and 1 and Revelation 17:4, where we have two women. Once again, let's briefly look at their dress. The woman in Revelation 12 representing God's people, clothed with the sun, the moon under feet. On her head, a garland or crown of 12 stars. Revelation 17:4, where we have this other woman arrayed in purple and scarlet, which is royal color, adorned with gold, precious stones, and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. So you have the two. One representing God's people, the other one doesn't. So let's summarize then. The New Testament materials on jewelry are fundamental agreement with what we found in the Old Testament in suggesting a very limited use of jewelry. In the New Testament, we find the case of jewelry for personal ornamentation explicitly addressed and rejected. Jewelry as a symbol of royalty is used by Christ, who is described as wearing a crown of gold. In his case, it represents victory and universal sovereignty. And you look at the 24 elders, they would have been given their crowns. You look at the New Jerusalem, she is adorned that way because God made her that way. Someone has said it this way: when you come to God, do not come with your adornments. Strip them off and allow him to change the heart, the character, the adornment of a meek and quiet spirit. The high priest, when he ministered on a daily basis before the people, he wore the breastplate with all of those jewels. That's when he represented the people. When he went into the most holy place, he took it off. No, sorry, let me rephrase that again. I just caught what I said. When he wore it in the holy place, he represented God before the people, with the 12 stones representing the 12 tribes on a daily basis. When he went into the most holy place, Yom Kippur, which was once a year, he took it off because now he's representing the people. So when he's representing the people, he doesn't have all that stuff on. When he represents God, he has that on. Now, let's take a little look at these two passages here. And our author points out that it relates to how we should address persons who are not part of the Christian community, their acts, to respect the authority of kings and governors, and I'm going to pull these up as I go through them. Therefore, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether to the king as supreme or to governors, or as to those who are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men, as free, yet not using liberty as a cloak for vice, but as bondservants of God. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. So he's talking about practical aspects of Christian living. And you read the rest of it, you will see where it comes out. And then we go to chapter 3. Where he now speaks to wives about their submission to their husbands. And one of the principles of understanding scripture is to seek to look at it within its cultural context, as well as look at the principle that the author is seeking to draw out. If we fail to do that, we run into problems. We have to look at what principle was he seeking to lay down, to whom was the author speaking, what were the conditions or the cultural context, the social conditions, et cetera, et cetera. What were these things that were happening to at the time where the people lived, whom the author was writing to? And it begins to open windows for us. So that's what we're looking at here. So first he addresses the wives, then eventually he addresses the husbands. So those are the two things we're looking at here. So let's go back. The married women and their husbands. Some of them were married to unbelievers, and so they act to submit themselves to their husband with the purpose of witnessing to them through their behavior, hoping that they may be converted to the gospel. Submitting to the husband seems to be explained in terms of living a life of purity and reverence. And so he says, if some do not obey the word, they without the word may be won by the conduct of their wives when they observe their chaste conduct accompanied by fear. So here in this first section, he's speaking to the women, but some of the women were married to men who were not believers. Whether they came into the church and then married them, or they were married to these men before they came into the church, whichever one, he's telling them this is how you ought to behave, so that by your conduct, your lifestyle, these individuals will see your conduct and they too may be won to Christ. And he's saying, based on that, here's how you are to conduct yourself with your character. And I want to highlight this for you. Where he says, seeing or observing your pure behavior in fear, devoid of verbal conflicts by testifying to their husbands through their Christian behavior. The adjective hagnos or pure is most probably emphasizing a moral purity, but it also includes the idea of rejecting evil in general, that is, purity of life. And this is something not just for women. These principles are here for all individuals, all men. All individuals, sorry. Do not lay hands, 1 Timothy 5:22, on anyone hastily, nor share in other people's sins. Keep yourself pure. So lest the men think they can get off scot-free, Paul also says, whatsoever things are true, noble, just, pure, lovely, of good report, if there's any virtue, if there's anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. Look at the New Living Translation. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. And so they had no problem saying, look, you ought to live a life that counts. You should be respected in your community based on your character and the way that you live. And those things are important. So let's look at a little further analysis of the passage. So he's saying, we find the wife's primary commitment to the Lord is expressed in the way they adorn themselves. And I was watching a video the other day on Facebook where I think it's Juanita Bynum was talking about Christian women who, and the way they dress. She's telling me, you're showing so much cleft and your skirt or dress is so tight that you could see every pimple on them. And saying and then you want to go in front of God's people and you're singing praise. She had some other stuff to say about it. Saying, how can you say you're a woman of God and look at the way you're dressed? And she's basically appealing to the principle of modesty, except she didn't quote a scriptural passage to support it. So let's look at the three things that Paul talks about. One, he speaks of braiding the hair. And they're saying, I'm going to highlight them for you. A technical phrase which describes a particular type of hairdresser common during the time of Peter, particularly among wealthy ladies. It was an elaborated braided hairstyle, unusually high, which was sometimes held up by a wire or lacquer. They didn't bother to lug this one up. So these coiffures required leisure to construct them, sometimes by means of curling iron and often with the help of a slave. The hair was in some cases decorated with countless gold spangles and almost entirely hiding the hair, glittering and tinkling with every movement of the head. Strabo describes the people who beautify their appearance by braiding their hair, growing beards, wearing gold ornaments, and only rarely can you see them touching one another in walking for fear that the ornament of their hair may not remain intact. And I found that quite interesting. So Peter rejects the adornment that consists of putting on gold ornaments. The exterior ornament of putting on gold, these would include necklace, earrings, bracelets, ornaments of gold worn around the hair. It was not uncommon. I don't know why people use the negative word. In other words, it was common to find women throughout the Roman Empire loaded with all kinds of jewelry. Many of them, according to some historians, like the ambulatory jewelry shops, Peter finds this to be incompatible with the Christian spirit. Finally, the apostle mentions the wearing of fine clothing or putting on of garments. It is obvious Peter has in mind certain type of clothing and not clothing in general. Hence the translations fine clothing, Revised Standard Version, grand robes, and others. The word hemation, rendered clothing, normally, where is it? Lost my spot. Normally the outer garment formed by an oblong piece of cloth worn above the chiton or the tunic or the undergarment, although it was also used to refer to garments in a more general way. This type of dress could be very simple or very sophisticated, becoming an adornment and establishing social distinctions. When I read this, I think of what you see at the Oscars the Emmy, and some other situations where you have all of these different fancy, whether by men or women, and all this elaborate stuff. And he's saying you're placing the emphasis on the wrong thing. And as I said at the beginning, what if we were to put the emphasis on character development, and we sometimes put on dressing and making sure this matches with that? So we look at someone and say, that tie don't match with his suit, or that this don't match with her dress, or her shoes and her outfit ain't match. And we can spend a lot when we buy stuff, and nothing wrong with that. But the emphasis is, the question is, where's the emphasis? Is it on wearing the finest and looking at this, and this one want this type of a bag that costs $800 and a couple thousand, and you need to have this and that? And there's nothing special about the bag. As someone says, what if it has a lot of, it's gem-studded? Well, I don't know why you want to spend that much money on a gem-studded bag. It does the same thing that a $60 bag would do, but I don't know, maybe it's an investment. You can sell it later on and reap a good benefit. But the emphasis again, and I want to stop here, even though our author covers it later on, and say this doesn't just refer to any particular jewelry, because he doesn't mention cufflinks. Now, I see a lot of guys wear them. Cufflinks is nothing but apparel. It's adornment, sorry. That's the only purpose of a cufflinks. They can easily use a button to put the sleeve together. Some persons use the tie pin and the little chain and everything. You can even do the same thing with your watch. You gotta have a certain type watch. I've seen watches in magazines that cost up to 160 grand. And they only have two hands and one stroke to show you where 12 o'clock is. You have to figure the rest by yourself. So obviously that watch doesn't do anything more than the $24 electronic watch I bought in 2017, which is still working. I'm not sure if I can find it, but it's somewhere around the house. They both tell the time. And as I told someone, it doesn't matter if yours is 15 seconds more accurate than mine. When you reach a room, either they consider you early or you're late. They're not going to say, well, oh, but based on Greenwich Meridian, blah, 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 blah. No. The person who runs the meeting says you're early or you're late. The person who rings the school bell, if they say it's 8:30, then it's 8:30. Even if they ring it 10 seconds early, it's still 8:30. So for me, a lot of it has to do with just status. We can look at the home where individuals, I used to watch a program on TV where they talk about, I remember the name of it, where they would look at a model home and design another home, buy it, based on it, for pennies. So they talk about the model home had a $5,000 coffee table, just the rest, coffee on, and a couple magazines. Wasn't it? It's a coffee table. And they say they can do the inspiration home, I think they call it, for about maybe 200 or maybe less. I don't remember the figures, but you get the idea. We need to adopt the principle and apply it across. There are persons who go to great length to do something with their vehicle, some with their homes, some with their clothing or their watches or whatever. It's still the principle of emphasizing outward physical adornment to an extreme as opposed to working on the character. Let's go a little further then. Well, I'll just make mention of this since it's here. The inner workings of the person as expressed by his or her parents, and they talk about Christ on the Mount of Transfiguration, how his clothes were shining. And they compared the dress of John. So what did you go out to see? A reed shaken by the wind? But what did you go out and see? A man clothed in soft garments? Indeed, those who are gorgeously apparelled and live in luxury are in king's courts. So he's comparing the rough-looking John the Baptist with someone that said, you didn't go to see someone all fancy up and everything. See, people like that live in who wear soft garments, live in luxury in king's courts. He's simply drawing a comparison between the two. And again, he points out, well, some say The attraction of the Christian wife to a pagan husband is consists not in external adornment, but in the more important internal qualities outlined in the following verses. And I need to point out that there are some Bible teachers within the Adventist Church who have a disagreement on this principle, and you need to be aware of it. Some don't see anything wrong. Some says, well, it's okay if you just do it in modest. Some say, no, don't do it at all. And he's saying, Peter's point is not saying don't put on clothes at all. What he is saying is that your adorning should be inward. And that is where the emphasis should be. And when you think, look at the television and you will see how many products there are just for skin to get rid of a rash or something of that nature, because we place a very high value on looks. And so you have persons getting plastic surgery and getting their jawbone trimmed down or something, or added something in to give them a certain look because it can cause them to get ahead. In some cultures, if you are taller than the average person where everybody is short, it can give you a leg up. That's literally. I once saw a documentary where a man had his bones basically cut. They cut the bone and extended it by adding something in, some additional bone or whatever they used. They gave him an additional 4 inches because it would be to his advantage to have. It's like going to certain Ivy League schools, they call them. You get an advantage in employment. Well, in some cultures, if you're taller, you stand to gain an advantage. So he went through all that pain just to gain another 4 inches because it would give him an advantage. And I want to read something here. What then shall we conclude? There are several things that can be said concerning Peter's intention in this passage. First, we have here a prohibition voiced in Peter's apostolic authority. He is clearly contrasting 2 types of behaviors or values, and is rejecting one, promoting the other. He is establishing what is right, what is expected of a Christian woman, and what is not acceptable in the community of believers. Whether his views are culturally conditioned or not will be discussed later on. Peter does not seem to be totally rejecting personal adornment. He is not condemning hairdressing, but a certain type of hairdressing. The same applies to clothing. The noun adornment designates in Greek literature arrangement, order, and then beauty or adornment. In 1 Peter 3:3, this noun means adornment, and its use does not suggest there's something intrinsically wrong with adorning oneself, because people did whatever they did. They wore clothes. They tried to look good. So the real issue is the rejection of a certain type of adornment. Christians are to take proper care of their appearance, but it should not be in conflict with Christian values and purpose of a Christian life. Finally, Peter is rejecting the use of jewelry as an exterior adornment and probably also as a sign of social status. And we know we have that today. So the text does not address the use of jewelry for other functional purposes. Signet seals, although Peter is aware of the fact that gold has other proper usages beside adornment, as currency, for example, as we read, these distinctions are important if we want to correctly understand the standard that he is setting up in this passage for the believer. What is the source of his command? And again, like I said, there are some persons who hold differences. A number of scholars argue that Peter's views are motivated by specific problems in the church. By specific problems the church was confronting in the first century and are therefore no longer applicable to church today because it exists in a different social environment. And that's something we need to consider. Was he dealing with something specific? If so, then how does it apply to us? Do we have those specific situations today? If it does, then it applies. They're saying if it doesn't, then it does not apply. And those who say it was just something specific to Peter's day, they emphasize Peter is calling Christians to control their desire for ostentation and luxury, to promote the principle of simplicity in dress and freedom from dependence on outward show. And they're saying that's what he's saying. He's not saying don't wear it at all. That's what one group says. He goes on to say Peter was writing to women who had become Christians, rejecting religion of their husbands, something considered by society at large to be an insubordination on the part of wives. And so he's saying his advice to them is based on a code of behavior common in, let me move this from here, in the Greco-Roman world for wives, and has the purpose of showing that when it comes to their behavior and the way they dress and adorn themselves, Christian wives support the moral values of their husbands. This reading of the text makes Peter's specific prohibition culturally conditioned and to some extent irrelevant to Western culture today. It is then concluded that the biblical interpreter could only transfer to the church today the principles behind the specific examples. And so Dr. Rodriguez is moving on, but I'm going to leave some of that. They're saying it is possible that the apostles had in mind Isaiah 3:18-24. And let's look at that quickly. In that day, referring to the day when the Lord punished the Israelites, or the daughters of Zion, as he called it, he will take away the finery, the jingling anklets, the scarves, the crescents, the pendants, the bracelets and the veils, the hairdress, the leg ornaments, the headbands, the perfume boxes, the charms and the rings, the nose shoes, the festal apparel and the mantlets, the outer garments, the purses and the mirrors, the fine linen, the turbans, and the robes. So this was something these people were going on. Some of these things had significant meaning to them. The crescent, like the moon, which was involved with some type of idol worship, it meant something deeper, it is said. The fact that Roman society promoted the same values the church is promoting gives Peter the opportunity to remind the community that Christians can use this to promote the respectability of Christianity in the pagan environment, and that it could also become an instrument to win the non-Christian husbands to the gospel. He appears to be saying that it is not the function of Christianity to upset social order, but rather to support it whenever possible. Peter's instruction on proper adornment belong to the Christian tradition. And he goes on to quote 1 Timothy 2:9-10. It should be said that Peter has an apologetic purpose in that, according to him, Christian morality is not incompatible with the highest moral values of a pagan society. The moral teachings of Greek and Roman writers do not determine the content of the teaching of Peter, but provide a reason for its inclusion in the epistle. He's saying he's not looking at society determine what should happen with the church, but he's saying he's drawing on the fact that society has several things which are in common with Christians, and therefore he is drawing on them to strengthen his point. The shared values contributes to a reduction of tensions with the Roman society. One, Christianity was not a legal religion, according to the Romans. Judaism was, but not Christianity. And so he's saying you gain respect within the community when you show that these principles that the community uphold, we also uphold. So the community upholds manners and respect. We say the church also believes in that. So the church now gets credibility and it enhances its witnessing opportunity. And what is the true adornment? As we said, the imperishable jewel of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is precious. So the hidden person of the heart explains what is meant by the hidden person, the center of thought and action. So the hidden person is not the inner side of the person, but the whole human being as it is determined from within the heart. That is, from believing thoughts and desires. This person is visible to God and expresses himself or herself through external actions and disposition visible to others. It's 7:20, and so we're going to stop here. I said I wasn't going to rush it. I may not finish it today, but that's okay. We can always come back to it. And so questions, comments as to what I've covered so far. Dealing with the whole subject, that's page 59. Let me see if I can Okay, trying to help you see. There you go. That's the best I can do right now. All right, let's do something else. You can get the book from here as an ebook. Okay, I'll make this a little larger. It's in Logos Bible Software by Angel Manuel Rodriguez, $9, or you can get it from here. But they only ship inside the US at this point. So you'd have to ship it to the US. This is paper. That one is strictly an ebook. This one here is the paper version of it. There you go. And the price is, well, $10, 81 in stock. But they said they're only shipping inside the US. So it's up to you which one, but I would encourage you get it and read it because it helps us to understand the passages and how different things are used in different ways. So you don't just pull up a text and pull up another one. Okay, questions, comments? Okay, someone asked, did I cover the wedding band? No. Well, yes, in the first one. But since you asked that, let me go to it. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has a position which pretty much hasn't changed over the years. And basically it's this. Let me see. Okay, I need to go to the beginning. I think it would be in this one here. Okay, here we go. The whole thing of wearing a wedding band, it started to come into play strongly in the Adventist Church during the World War. When the men were wearing, the women wore the wedding band to show that they were being faithful to their husbands who were off. So it became a standard within society. And Adventist women says, well, hey, if I'm not wearing one, people think I'm just wanting to fool around. In Europe, it may surprise some of you, but our pastors in Europe wear wedding bands. We had a German pastor come to us when I was in college in Jamaica. And the professor asked him about the wedding band. He said, if he takes this off when he's home, he is seen as being promiscuous. He wants to play the field. That's why he took off his wedding band. And so the students who came to study who were married from England, because of the culture in Jamaica, did not wear their wedding bands. The ladies wore it, which to me is somewhat hypocritical that a lady must wear a wedding band, but a man cannot. To me, it just doesn't. And we found all sort of unique ways and dance around it when the woman is a weaker vessel, therefore she needs to wear it and all sort of stuff. Basically, the position of the church is this. If you're married and you choose to, you can wear it. That's the base. Now they talk about simplicity, modesty, and economy. You have others, some persons who go and buy these expensive things, and I spoke about this in the first meeting, where there's a thought, there was debate back and forth, okay, on it. But the church's position is if you want to wear it, you wear it. In some of the Latin American cultures, some wear, some do not. It's up. In parts of Europe, they wear it. I don't know what's happening on the African continent. I don't recall if any of the married students wore it when I was in college. But I tell people, don't make a big issue out of it. If someone is convinced to wear their wedding band, let them wear it. If they choose not to, then don't make an issue out of it. I tell them I have bigger fish to fry, if you can pardon the pun, because there are more important things for me to deal with than whether or not someone is wearing their wedding band. This is a case where you let persons be fully persuaded. There are things that take on cultural significance that we adopt. Everybody will tell me I'm immodestly dressed if I came to church on Sabbath morning in short pants. Well, not everybody, but most people. I'm expected, particularly as a pastor, to dress conservatively. I must have on a coat. I must wear a tie. For me, a tie is another ornamental piece of clothing, by the way, because it serves no practical purpose. I took my bath before I came to church, so I'm not wearing a tie to make sure you don't smell body odor. You follow me? Coat, same thing. Is just one of the things that we have been so culturalized in that it has now become essential. It's professionally, or it's a part of our ethics, so to speak, or professionalism, I guess you would say, that we wear a coat. Why do we wear coats? We inherited from the Europeans. Why did they wear coats? It was cold where they came from. And I guess they just got stuck in wearing it when they came here, but we're in a tropical climate. There's no need to overheat the body, especially when there's no AC in the church and you're sweating like crazy. So these are things that we should look at. Okay. On page 145, 156, some church members in North American division, as in other parts of the world, feel that wearing a simple marriage band is a symbol of faithfulness to the marriage vow, and declare that such persons should be fully accepted into the fellowship and service of the church. I know of one church who told a brother, this was way back in the 80s, that if he wanted to serve as a deacon, he had to take off his wedding band. We don't take that position anymore, male and female, and none of our pastors wear it. And here's the irony: if a pastor started wearing it, some members have a problem with it. But if the brother across, sitting 2 rows in the back of them wear it, then it's not a problem. So you see the challenge that we have. And this has been something among Adventists. It's becoming more and more, especially with the young people. And you can teach and you can explain. By the way, it is not one of the reasons given for dropping someone from membership. It is not one of the reasons. There were 13 reasons. This is not one of them. The other thing I want to point out is not a part of the baptismal vow. And if somebody is still using that pledge card, which talk about not eating pork, tell them get rid of it. The church has 13 baptismal vows that candidates must affirm, whether in public or in front of a church board. Yes, that's an option. Many people don't know that. You can bring the candidates and they can do their affirmation before the board, and then you just bring them to the church and vote it. Even that's another topic. People wonder why they have to be voted into a church. Is it that the church members don't want them? That's something else we may need to look at later on. But anyone else, other questions you may have? Let's see on YouTube. You can type it in the chat. Questions on anything I've covered so far? Okay. As I said, next Sunday, we start our 3 weeks of evangelism on the books of Daniel and Revelation, but we start each evening with a health lecture. And then afterwards, I will go into prophecies of the book of Daniel and Revelation. The plan is to stream all meetings live, and that starts from 6 to 8. So that's the plan. Let's hope everything goes well, weather cooperates with us, and everything works out well. We don't have no power outages. No cables are fried by the temperature, anything of that nature. So I don't see any other questions, comments. I'm trusting that I've made it a little clearer. It's not the end. As I said, we will come back. We'll come back to this at another point, but this will be the last until the 30th of October is when we conclude our series. And then I'll probably continue the first Sunday in November. Normally that's Pastor Hannah's time, but I'll probably take that one in order to try and finish the series. So continue reading, but I will strongly encourage you to get the book. This is an ebook. You would download the app and you can read it in the book. Well, this is the paper version, sorry. You'd have to ship it to Florida. They say they're not shipping outside of the United States. This is Adventist Biblical Research, Adventist Biblical Research or Seventh-day Adventist Biblical Research Institute. You Google it, you'll find it. I'll post the link directly in the chats for you. If you're interested in getting it, there you go. And on YouTube, I will share that also. Place it in the chat where you can get it also. If you have any further questions on the ebook, I think the print one is straightforward. You order it, you ship it to the States, and you call it a day. That's it. The ebook, if you have problems, you have my number, you can give me a shout and we'll take it from there. So with that, let's close with prayer. Thank you, dear God, for the opportunity to continue to study. Help us to continue to search the scriptures, to seek to understand. May we do so with a humble mind and heart, the understanding the word of God. Bless us this evening, I pray, in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Good evening, and I'll see you on Sunday at 6 o'clock. Same New Anglican Seventh-day Adventist Church, where we'll start streaming live Healthy You in 2022. God bless.